Welcome to today's segment of the Third Testament Foundation live stream. Let me just put that one there. So today's question, it's kind of a long title. What was the title? What is it that transforms beings into humanitarians and creates cosmic consciousness? And the short answer is actually that when we know, we don't know anything. But let's just get a little more in depth with that. And before we read the whole text, let me just read the answer here. And where we do not understand events, we must naturally act blindly. And where this mental blindness exists as the basis for our will and action, we naturally, from a cosmic point of view, do not know what we are doing. And as it is solely there that we can act against the world plan, against humanitarianism, then every inhumane action will thus in reality be exclusively a product of ignorance. And it is the understanding of this that transforms us into humanitarian beings. When we, like Christ, understand that our persecutor, or all the beings that manifest cruelty, which means antipathy, anger, persecution, hatred, and vengeance towards us, act entirely in mental blindness or ignorance, then it takes away the whole sting of their behavior towards us. One then understands how foolish all indignation, hatred, and vengeance is towards such beings. And one manifests as little anger towards such beings as towards a small, helpless child in a cradle or other mentally inept beings, the insane and mentally defective. And it is thus from this state of consciousness that humanity's oldest and greatest wise men proclaim the precepts about not judging, not avenging, or in any other way causing suffering for other beings, but turning the right cheek when one is smitten on the left, and on the whole loving one's neighbor as oneself. It is this step of consciousness from which these precepts are manifested that constitutes the Holy Spirit, referred to in the Bible, and which in my main work, Leaves Bow, the Book of Life, is expressed as cosmic consciousness. So, we're going to do a little introduction to this text. I picked a couple of chapters out of it and explaining this evolutionary stages thing that is going on here in this what is transforming us into humanitarians and creating cosmic consciousness, because it is evolution that is creating that. And we are different levels on evolution. But let me just read these, the little headlines or highlights, the headlines for the titles for all the chapters that I picked out from this book called Cosmic Consciousness, written in 1950 by Martinez. So, the faculty of memory behind the ability to sense and perceive. In order that the sensory reaction can become experience or knowledge, it must be connected through concentration with the experiences of the individual. Where the being is still a cosmic infant, it cannot see the perfection or the universal love in nature or the universe. What is it that transforms beings into humanitarians and creates cosmic consciousness? And then lastly, the road to cosmic consciousness goes through the development of the faculty to understand and forgive. So that's a little abstract that we're going to read. It takes about, I would say, half hour today to read. So if you look at the symbol, Martinez calls it his main symbol. It's entitled The Eternal World Picture, the Living Being Two, the Eternal Godhead, and the Eternal Sons of God. And we see that there is 6 colors, in X3, or the created manifest world, symbolizing the 6 realms of existence, or the 6 kingdoms, being the mineral kingdom, land kingdom, and the animal kingdom. On the bottom here, the physical realms, and then on the 3 on the top, we have the real human kingdom, the world of wisdom, and the divine world. So, evolution goes in spiral cycles around in these 6 realms. So depending where we are in evolution, we are in situated in one of these 6 realms. So different beings, we have all the different beings out here, symbolized by all these white rings, are at different evolutionary stages. Some are up here, yellow, green, blue, and some are here in the light indigo, red, and the orange. And the whole thing about the planet here going towards the star, going counterclockwise in its evolutionary spiral, is we are having beings incarnated on the planet that actually are at different levels of evolution. And humanitarianism is actually an expression of neighborly love. So neighborly love is symbolized by the yellow color here, which is culminating in the real human kingdom, and which kingdom has the law. The law of that kingdom is loving one neighbor, loving one's neighbor, yeah? Every man for each other. As opposed to the animal kingdom, symbolized by the orange color, that is the rule by the law, every man for himself, right? It's a dog-eat-dog world, and kill or be killed. But we see how this orange killing principle, the explosion energy, tapers off as we enter the real human kingdom, the entrance into which is symbolized by this star. And that star is, Martinez calls it the Great Birth. It's a symbol for the Great Birth, or cosmic consciousness, which is actually the birth of the intuition body. So, today we're just gonna look at what humanitarianism is and how do we get there. And basically what we're going to look at is how do we become more loving. That means how do we get into this real human kingdom through this initiation of the great birth, the activation of our intuition body, which means how do we become more loving. Actually, how do we become so loving that we love all beings everywhere? Or how do we become all loving beings, beings that love unconditionally? So, and that is the true humanitarianism. So if we, well, just for the record, all the symbols are copyright of Martinez Institute. And also, if you have any questions you'd like to text or call in, you can do so on this number, 1-941-462-3177. And if you want some topics covered in the next live stream, you can just text them in, or you can also email or voicemail, or leave a message on the voicemail. So, without further ado, we'll just read the text and then call it the day. So, at the same time as this involution, so we'll just briefly, involution is as we go into the darkness culminating, you know, where the orange is, that's the darkness. As beings over here in the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, they go into the animal kingdom, it is that the whole drive there, that is the involution. And then as we go out of the animal kingdom, out of the darkness towards the light again, towards up in the non-physical realms, that is what Martinez calls evolution. So there's involution and evolution. Okay, so at the same time as this involution into physical materials makes the being heavy and earthbound, the beginning or the first stages of the process we call evolution takes place. Through the above mentioned reactions of the individual's contact with external physical nature, memories of these reactions enter the consciousness of the individual. We call these memories experiences. Experiences upon experiences are gradually accumulated in an organ for this purpose, that is, in the consciousness of the individual. It is this organ that is called the body of memory in Levy's book. This body, together with the accumulated wealth of experience, becomes like an entire file or index for the individual. Without this index, it would be quite impossible for any being to sense. If you, at this moment, completely or totally lost your memory, it would be impossible for you to sense. You would indubitably see, hear, feel, or perceive the reactions of your organism's contact with external nature, but it would be totally impossible for you to identify these reactions. In other words, it would be impossible for you to know what it was you were seeing, hearing, feeling, or perceiving. You would not know where you were at the moment. Let us suppose that you heard a human being talking. You would not be able to understand anything of this talk. If you have the faculty to understand something, it is solely because of the experiences that you previously have gathered in these fields. The more experiences you have in these fields, the better faculty you will have for understanding them. And then ultimately, when your material of experience is sufficient, you will be able to have complete control of the fields and the reactions, whereas the opposite is the case when you have not had the experiences. But though you may not be able to understand the subjects, it does not debar you from hearing talks about them, and does not mean that your hearing is not just as good as the hearing of those who understand the talks. As you see, hearing alone is not sufficient. Where did we go here? Not sufficient. Okay, hearing alone is not sufficient. It is the same with everything that you see. If you do not have in your memory recollections about experiences like those you're seeing, then you will not in any way be able to understand or comprehend what it is you're seeing. It is on this phenomenon that all erroneous belief is based. When a primitive human being from the dark jungles of Africa is faced with one of modern civilization's technical wonders, be it a car, an airplane, or any other form of machinery, he will look upon such phenomena as sorcery or something supernatural. It is simply because he has never before experienced anything corresponding that his collected experiences or memory is totally lacking in experiences of this kind. He cannot understand how the machine can work, and he imagines that it is animated by invisible supernatural powers. Though the physical eyesight of the primitive being is as good and clear as that of the civilized being, this alone is not enough. Sensing can take place, but the knowledge of the detailed truth or reality of the sensed object is totally out of the question in situations where one does not have memories of previous corresponding or related experiences that can act as a greater or smaller material of previous knowledge through which one, to a correspondingly great or small extent, can recognize or identify the new experience. Behind every sensory impression, a meeting takes place between a force emanating from the individual's deepest layer of consciousness and an ingoing force from the outer influence of on the senses of the individual. At its strongest, the force emanating from the individual constitutes the phenomena you know as concentration. When you concentrate your thoughts, it is in reality only in order to be able to clear up a problem that is mystical or unknown to you. This concentration of thoughts is the same as mobilizing all the experience you have in your consciousness that are related to the problem. Concentration is thus a method by means of which you try to understand the unknown by means of what you already know. That this is the case is established as fact through the circumstance that, in a case where you cannot find in your thoughts or memory experiences related to an unknown problem, the same problem will be as mystical and problematic as broadcasting or any of the other technical and scientifically most modern wonders are for the human being from the jungle. All sensing will thus be the same as reactions resulting from the meeting of known and unknown phenomena with our memories, which means their meeting with the reactions of our previous experiences. Everything that reacts with our senses, whether it be our sight, hearing, smell, taste, or feeling, is quite unknown to us until the moment it gets into contact with our previous experiences. Our faculty to sense, and thereby our faculty to understand, will thus depend on how great a material of experience our memory represents. The more experiences we possess, the easier, deeper, and quicker do we sense new experiences in the same field, while the opposite is the case in every field where there are very poor or a total lack of previous experiences. So evolution is experience, right? The more experiences we have, the higher the evolutionary stage. As mentioned above, we can see from the fate of the human beings that they, to a great extent, are still on a wrong course. Contrary to the religion's wise and ideal precepts and injunctions, hundreds of thousands of beings steer their fate straight towards darkness, towards sufferings, and towards hell. And ecclesiastical Christianity predicts eternal perdition for these beings. But this does not happen. It is precisely through suffering, indeed, in the very fire of hell, that we witness the Almighty's powerful steering hand, His eternal logic and loving plan for the living beings. No being has ever come into the world and met the sun's clear light in order that it should end in an eternal hell. Just as little as a being ever began to maintain life by inhaling the crystal clear air or atmosphere of the planet in order that it should end in an eternal vengeance, torture, or mutilation, which is devised by Providence as a punishment for sinners. No, through hell's total darkness, where the suffering is greatest, every being will inevitably feel that the Godhead is at his closest, will hear his voice, feel his saving and protecting, upon embrace and experience that his caress never for a moment can let him go, but is eternally present through time and space, through light and darkness. But this is not yet felt by human beings. It has not yet such a developed faculty of perception, or such developed senses, that it can see the light in the darkness, love revealed in suffering, or divine perfection in unhappy fates. On the contrary, it sees and perceives chiefly only darkness in the darkness. It perceives any persecution, slander, or antipathy from its fellow beings as evil. If it has an unhappy fate, it sees itself as the victim of a play of chance, superior, dead, and blind forces, or the disfavor of an angry God, persecution, and punishment for sins. That it, in this situation, cannot perceive life's greatest answer, everything is very good, is natural enough. It will perceive or feel that this answer is absurd. It cannot believe or understand that suffering or its unhappy fate can be for the good. It feels itself as a martyr or a victim of great injustice. And it is just here that its cosmic infancy is revealed, because no one, from a cosmic point of view, can do wrong or suffer wrong. Everything in the divine world plan is 100% useful, which in turn is the same as 100% loving. The world plan is thus the combination of love, but when it is the combination of love, it cannot possibly be better. To understand this and act accordingly is thus the same as being one with the Father, which is in turn the same as the absolute prerequisite for getting true peace of mind and thereby being able to experience the goodwill promised by the angel's Christmas message. The history of humanity, which in a way is the youngest and latest in the great process of creation, shows that it began down in the barbarian and animal forms of life and grew through this primitive animal stage of nature to its present civilized stage. It is true that this civilized stage still represents the killing principle, which by far surpasses everything that one has previously been able to see of the same principle. But it is also a fact that side by side with the use of this principle, that is, war, murder, mutilation, there has also grown in the human mentality an increasing interest for or understanding of the fact that without humanitarianism, it would be impossible for culture and thereby peace and happiness to exist for humanity. We therefore see that barbaric laws, which formerly were the rule, have gradually been abolished. Openly buying and selling human beings is no longer permitted, and just as one has fought against slavery, so one tries today, through the police and the judicial system, to restrain theft, murder, and violence, indeed, even war. The combination of the worst evil for humanity can exist nowadays only in the name of humanitarianism. All beings fight in order to beat down the opponent's supposed cruelty. Does not everyone fight in order to create justice and peace? Who dares to confess that they make war for the opposite reason? And the result of all this struggle, all this manifestation of suffering, does not fail to appear. This is humanity's own melting pot. Out of this process can come only the one ultimate result, that is, humanitarianism. And the worse the war, mutilation, and suffering that human beings commit against each other, the quicker the result will be. Since all suffering is the absolute sign that one has manifested causes that are at variance with the world plan, and that all true well-being is just as sure a sign that one has manifested causes that are in contact with this plan and are in harmony with the very Earth's transformation into the home for humanitarianism and perfection. No being can in the long run be ignorant of this. The experiences of suffering accumulate gradually in the consciousness and form the previously mentioned index or file that determines how we understand or perceive any new experience. No experience in daily life can be sensed without confronting this index. Remember, this is our memory body, yeah, the index. Our understanding of what we see or experience depends on this index. As I have already mentioned, we will be incapable of understanding any experience to which we do not have a counterpart in this index. It will be quite incomprehensible for us, And where we do not understand events, we must naturally act blindly. And where this mental blindness exists as the basis for our will and action, we naturally, from a cosmic point of view, do not know what we are doing. And as it is solely there that we can act against the world plan, against humanitarianism, then every inhumane action will thus in reality be exclusively a product of ignorance. And it is the understanding of this that transforms us into humanitarian beings. So the understanding of what it is to not be humanitarian, right? That is what transforms us into being humanitarian. When we, like Christ, understand that our persecutor, or all the beings that manifest cruelty, which means antipathy, anger, persecution, hatred, and vengeance, towards us act entirely in mental blindness or ignorance, then it takes away the whole sting of their behavior towards us. When one then understands how foolish all indignation, hatred, and vengeance is towards such beings, and one manifests as little anger towards such beings as towards a small helpless child in a cradle, or other mentally inept beings, the insane and mentally defective. And it is thus from this state of consciousness that humanity's oldest and greatest wise men proclaim the precepts about not judging, not avenging, or in any other way causing suffering for other beings, but turning the right cheek when one is smitten on the left, and on the whole loving one's neighbor as oneself. It is this step of consciousness from which these precepts are manifested that constitutes the Holy Spirit referred to in the Bible, and which in my main work, Leaves Bow, the Book of Life, is expressed as cosmic consciousness. So the last chapter here. Cosmic consciousness is thus the same as the human being's completely developed mentality. The mentality that is the goal of the great process of creation or the transformation of the earth. The degree of mentality that enables mankind, when the majority of its individuals possess it, to understand the world plan and thereby be in harmony with the great process of creation itself, and thus administer and distribute the planet's abundant vital products and output in such a way that no one any longer needs to starve or freeze, no one feels a desire to steal from anyone else or rob them, no one will die of poverty or extravagance. Just as this state of consciousness is an expression of such a great and extensive mental index, that the individual thereby will be able to perceive all life's ups and downs as a luxurious process of instruction, staged by Providence, which, through the formation of memory, unwaveringly will bring all beings to the realization of the great answer, everything is very good. Thus, the world plan's identity as culminating love will be manifested through all living beings, regardless of how they now look, think, and act. Every movement, every vibration, every act is God's manifestation, is light and love, and thereby the creation of well-being for all living beings. Verily, being in contact with this creation is the fulfillment of life's greatest gospel, or the realization of the angel's glorious Christmas message, peace on earth. Our heartfelt wish for all terrestrial human beings ought therefore to be that they may quickly learn to understand everything that they today do not like, everything that they want to persecute, because with the true understanding they will be able to forgive those beings they feel have done them an injustice, those beings who have slandered them, or who even from a physical point of view have destroyed their joy of life. Only In the training of forgiveness does the road to cosmic consciousness lie open. But as one does not need this training in all the fields that have one's full sympathy and love, since everything here is already forgiven, then one can open the doors to heaven only by lovingly embracing all one's enemies. It is true that it is not very easy, and that they would perhaps not tolerate or understand such an embrace, but that cannot prevent us from doing it in our thoughts. There is no enemy that we cannot let into our hearts in that way, thus liberating our radiant spirit from the dark spots that today prevent it from perceiving the Eternal Father, accompanying us through spheres and zones, through time and space, for all eternity. So thank you for today, and I hope to see you soon on the next live stream.